Welcome to the Daily Interlakes Kalispell Mayoral Candidate Forum. I'm Matt Baldwin, Regional Editor for the Daily Interlake. I will be the moderator for tonight's forum. This evening, we will hear from the candidates running to be Kalispell's mayor. Candidates participating tonight include the city's incumbent mayor, Mark Johnson, and Sid Dowd, who is a city councilor in Ward 4. This evening's questions have been submitted by Daily Interlake readers and our editorial staff. They have not been shared with the candidates in advance. All the candidates have been briefed on the process for this evening's event and have agreed to follow the established guidelines to keep us on track. As a reminder, candidates will receive a 15-second warning when their time is expiring, and they will be muted at the conclusion of the time. This forum is being recorded and streamed live on Facebook, and a recorded version will be made available on the Daily Interlakes website. With all that said, it's time to begin. Each of you will have 2 minutes to introduce yourself to the audience and tell us why you're running to be Kalispell's mayor. We're going to begin with Sid tonight. Sid, you have 2 minutes.
Thank you. I'm Sid Dowd. I was born and raised in Great Falls. I was active duty Army for 13 years as a forward observer, medic, and then in information technology. I targeted Northwest Montana when I was ready to get out of the Army, and me and my family moved here to the Valley in 2006 to work for Plum Creek in IT. Currently, I am a senior consultant for Summit 7 Systems, a tech company serving defense contractors. With me here are my wife, Kristen Marie, and our 3 children, Antoinette, Caden, and Cyan. They're all grown up and they are all amazing human beings. I've been active politically since 2016, and I was elected to city council in 2019. My goal was actually to fish and be left alone. My government wouldn't leave me alone. We kept losing our God-given individual rights, and that alarmed me. The US Constitution protects those rights and is my guiding document. I'm proud to be endorsed by Montanans for Limited Government. Thanks.
Thank you, Sid. Mark.
So I'm Mark Johnson. I'm the current mayor of Kalispell. I'm serving, wrapping up my 2nd term, and I'm seeking a 3rd term as mayor. I was born in Whitefish and graduated from Whitefish High School. After that, I attended Gonzaga University, where I received a degree in accounting and then worked as a CPA in Bellevue, Washington for about 5 years before returning home to raise my family here. My wife and I, Jennifer, and our 7 children, who I won't name because I'd be at the end of my 2 minutes by the time I was done, but my 7 children make Kalispell their home. And we are basically looking forward to raising next generation of Montanans in Kalispell. My wife and I are hoping for grandchildren at some point in time. So the reason I'm running for mayor is really because of my kids and my future grandchildren. I want to make sure that I can build a community or work to build a community where they can work and prosper, and their children will have a place to be raised and then to hopefully have a career and work as well. For too many years, we've seen Montana's youth have to leave Montana to make a living. And what I wanted to do when I became mayor was work to create an environment where we could have employers come into Kalispell so that our children don't have to leave. We lose too much talent to other states, and that's one of the reasons why I ran for mayor. So that's why I'm here tonight. It's really for the future. I believe in public service, and I've been doing that for most of my adult life. Served on hospital boards prior to being mayor, where I was served on the North Valley Hospital Board for 11 years, and then subsequently on the Kalispell Regional Hospital Board prior to getting active in politics in 2008. So I'm here running for mayor for 1 more term.
Thanks, Mark. All right, let's get into some questions. So you're gonna have 2 minutes for this question. And we're going to begin with a reader-submitted question that addresses a topic that's come to the forefront over the last few years, the need for workforce housing. Josh Healy points out that long-term rentals are more expensive than ever and difficult to find, and home ownership seems to be slipping out of reach for many. It's important to note that the city has permitted about 330 new multifamily units this year alone, and that is up from 130 this time last year. What is your plan to ensure that Kalispell has an adequate level of workforce housing? And Mark, you're up first.
Okay. You know, it's a great question, and one, as you say, it is at the forefront of everybody's mind right now. And this is one that my own children are working through as well. And, you know, the policies that we put in place, it was 8 years ago when I became mayor, we started to look at what are the impediments to development and to growth within the city of Kalispell. And we recognize that we have a competitor in Flathead County. People can either develop very cheaply in Flathead County, or they can come to Kalispell and pay the fees, the additional fees and hookup fees, et cetera, that are required in the city of Kalispell. We also started looking at regulations. What are some of the things prohibiting or restricting development? And over 6 years, we started working on reducing those fees and reducing the regulations. We still have more work to do on the regulations specifically. And that will lead to a broader community conversation about what are some of the niceties that we want to have within our subdivisions that add to the cost. So if we look at the current situation, we have added a significant number of units. And as the reader noted, we've added about 300 and some additional multifamily units this year to date, and we have more coming online. This is really a supply and demand issue. And what we're trying to do is figure out how do we get government out of the way to add more inventory, because as we add more inventory, there's less pricing control by the landlords. So if we can do that, the goal is to work forward, trying to add more inventory so that market forces can reduce those prices. We do also have some partners in the community working on some deed restricted property, homes for sale, and we will work with them with their federal agencies as they need to support them. But that's really the role that we can do at the city government at this time. We're not an entitlement city, so we don't have access to housing and urban development funds. And we've often found that a lot of those projects that do that don't necessarily deliver the product that the people need. So what we're going to continue to do is work on increasing that inventory to bring down the prices. And I anticipate to see this rapid increase in growth in the number of people coming in. At some point that has to slow, and then the inventory overtakes the demand, which will necessitate a drop in prices.
Thanks, Mark. Sid, you're up.
Thanks. My answer is going to be a little shorter. The mayor said a lot of the things that I believe in as well. We need to continue to work with our developers in our community to increase the number of available units for all income levels. We're especially worried about our service industry workers, which we have a severe shortage of. The workforce shortage actually is a product of our lack of housing supply for the most part. I like community solutions that lead to fixing some of this problem, like the land trust we have here. That's a great innovative way to add housing for lower income families. But just raising the total number of housing units available is going to help us out. Even if they're the bigger units, people will move into those, freeing up some of the smaller units. And that housing supply will actually drive down the cost of our current housing. And that will actually lead to places for our workers to live eventually. It's a long process. It's the best way to do it. Any other government solution has a tendency to lock people into poverty. I don't want to do that. I want to make sure everybody has the ability to better their income. So I'll work hard on the availability and the number of units available to bring down housing costs.
Thank you. All right, next question, you're gonna have 2 minutes to answer as well. It's another reader submitted question that also has to do with the city's growth. The latest census data shows that Kalispell grew by 23% over the last decade. It now has a population of about 24,558. That growth rate is slightly higher than what is anticipated in the Kalispell's growth policy. Kalispell has proven to be a desirable place to live, and there are no signs of this growth trend slowing down anytime soon. In fact, the census was taken during the pandemic, and that number, 24,500, probably isn't accurate. With this growth, Charles Hamill says he is concerned about irresponsible development. He wants to know how you intend to oversee future development in the city with consideration for our beautiful valley. And Sid, you're going to go first.
All right, and he's totally correct. The cat's out of the bag. People want to move here, and we're not going to be able to slow down the people coming into our valley because we're a desirable place to live. There's always a toss-up between keeping our nature that we love, that's the reason people move here, and being able to account for that growth. The city council has already started looking at ways to promote infill so that we don't sprawl out into the county. One of the ways we do that is to make developing within Kalispell more desirable. We want to work as much as we can towards infill in Kalispell so we can keep our nature the way we like it and keep the reason that we live here in the first place. So, it's not a very sexy answer. That working on the number of available housing units actually ties into this as well. We want those housing units to be inside of Kalispell so that we can stop the sprawl. We have a lot of room to grow in Kalispell, and making that attractive to developers is something that we need to keep doing. We've already started down that road. The best way to do this is to get government out of the way, make it more affordable for companies to build here inside of Kalispell. So that's the direction I'm going to continue to push. And for that very reason, I moved here because I love to fish. This is one of the best places in the country to do that. And I want to keep the lakes in the countryside clear like they are now. So infill is the answer.
Thank you. Mark.
It's one of those things that we've looked at, and really the planning that we have done through the city with the growth policy, we have a defined boundary for the city with the growth policy. And the question is, do we want to extend that boundary out? And I'm concerned with extending that boundary out because it would lead to more sprawl. We also have to understand that we do have a competitor in Flathead County. We have property owners in Flathead County with large parcels. Much of these properties that have been farm families who no longer have relatives who want to continue farming. So we do have a competitor. So what we need to do is we need to look at the city as a business and go, how do we market and how do we make our city more attractive to lead to that infill that Sid mentioned? And we've done that through the core area plan, which is now the rail in the middle of town. We're seeing a lot of development there. We have relaxed some of the constraints on height requirements, and we're really pushing through zoning. We're really pushing to have more density in some of these areas. The biggest thing as a city is how do we add to the concept called placemaking. Basically, we want people to look at Kalispell, look at the areas that we have created through the zoning process to let developers use their creativity to build the density, to build the projects that people want. And it's through that placemaking that I think we can market that people coming from more urban areas into Kalispell, they want that urban setting. Some want the 5-acre parcels, but we're hoping that by doing the additions to density and placemaking within the city of Kalispell, we will see more of that demand to come into the city. So, I think it's key to remember that the more dense we can make it downtown, the cheaper it is also to deliver services. So by doing this, we achieve a couple things. We maintain the beauty that we have around us, the valley, why we all live here, and we also make it cheaper to deliver the services necessary to meet the needs of the growing population. And he's right, it's 24,000 in the census. I'm betting we're closer to 25 to 26,000 at this point in time.
Thanks, Mark. All right, we're going to go to another reader submitted question. This one gets into the weeds a little bit. This resident wants to hear where each candidate stands on architectural review standards. As an example, he notes that 2 town pump stores were built at the same time in the valley, one in Whitefish and one in Kalispell, but each has a very different design. Do you believe Kalispell needs to readdress its architecture standards to preserve or help define the city's character, or is the city on the right track? And Mark, you're going to go first.
You know, it's interesting. We just in this last year we reworked some of our downtown architectural guidelines for the historic downtown, largely with this in mind of how do we retain that historic feel of downtown Kalispell. You know, we look at some of the other neighboring communities, and I'll look to my former hometown of Whitefish, and there is a very distinct difference in the construction of the town pump there versus the ones that we have in Kalispell. When we look at this and we look at the architectural guidelines, there's kind of a double-edged sword with this. We like the appearance, but we also have to understand that the appearance comes at a cost. So right at a time where we're working on how do we add workforce housing, how do we keep costs low for people for rental homes, et cetera, it's a little harder to come back with an architecture review committee or process that adds direct costs to those developers who are building those projects. So it's one of those things that we need to balance. And I think we can do it. We did it largely through the process for our historic downtown standards. We tried to balance a lot of those things with the material requirements, where we tried to give them a little more latitude with an eye toward what is the cost of those upgrades that would be required to meet the historic standards. So it's as I say, it's a double-edged sword. And I'm confident that what we have for the downtown will work. The question is, does the community want to see this extend further out? And we have to understand the ramifications that brings with some of the other goals that we're trying to achieve.
Okay, thanks, Mark. Sid.
Thanks. You know, the mayor probably said this well, but I will add a couple things here. I'm not a big fan of restrictive guidelines or processes that will add costs to, you know, the construction of buildings and houses. Correct. Right now, I think this is the worst time that we could implement anything extra. I will agree that the downtown has a significant push to have a look and feel, to grow a quality historic downtown. We have guidelines set around that architecture already. I think the city has done a good job there. I think that in some cases it's a little bit too restrictive, but I'm a minority view on the council in that regard. But, you know, for me, if anything can move toward less restrictions and more and less restrictive zoning, that's the way I'd like to go.
Thanks, Sid. Okay, we're going to shift gears here. You're going to have 2 minutes to answer this question as well. Over the last few years, Kalispell City Council has had many conversations surrounding homelessness in the city. It even established a task force in 2019 to assess the realities of homelessness in the area. In your opinion, since then, has the city taken the right approach in addressing homelessness? And what are some of your thoughts on the topic? And Sid, we're going to start with you.
Okay. I love to discuss this topic. I think that we can even do more here as a community for our homeless situation. I think the numbers that we started with, that we understood, or we thought we understood about our homeless situation, have grown considerably since that time, since we started talking about this. As I understand it, and with talking with our friends at the Warming Center, they let us know that the homeless population here is actually bigger than the homeless population in Missoula. And Missoula is quite a bit bigger city than we are. So we have the problems of a Missoula, but expanded. And, you know, we're making strides in the right direction here. It's a little bit slow, and this is going to take a little bit more community cooperation. There's not a whole bunch that government can do in this area. We can get out of the way as much as possible. We can encourage that we have more solutions for our homeless, but, you know, we are making some strides in the right direction. We've added a social worker into our police force so that we don't just have to shoo along homeless. We actually can give them some some opportunity to do something different than just move to a different area. We have our warming shelter that's opened up. It's a beautiful place. I've seen it I saw it when it was a garage, and I've seen it now that it's been developed. And it's very heartening to see that facility. We need more things like that. That's for the emergency portion of the homeless. That's to keep them alive so they don't freeze to death at night. We also have partners like the Samaritan House, which is building an expansion right now, providing homes for homeless people. And, you know, those are the things that I would like to work with the community on, have a community partnership that develops those kinds of solutions.
Thank you. Mark.
Sure, Matt. You know, this is one of those issues that when I first became mayor, we had very limited number of homeless people around town. And the numbers have drastically increased over the last 8 years. And a lot of it for multiple reasons. And, you know, we can get back to what's the ultimate cause of this, what's the ultimate source. I don't think looking back in history makes any sense at this point. We have to deal with the issue that we have at this point in time. And as we look at some of the solutions that we've had, you know, it's looking at how do we gain access to service for the homeless so they know what services are available through them, through the United Way, through the food bank, through the warming center, through Samaritan House, et cetera. And that was largely why I asked for the task force. It was to look for those community services, to get an assessment of where are we with those community services. And I know when the results of that task force, that report came out, it caused a little bit of angst amongst the service providers. But I think most importantly, what it's done is it's forced all of us to have a conversation, and those groups now communicate on a regular basis. I attend meetings with a couple of the different providers with Joe Russell, because the health department is one of the key components to how do we deliver healthcare to the homeless as well, because the goal is to bring people out of homelessness and to give them a hand up and pull them back up into society and get their feet under their ground for those who want that. And not all of them do, but we need to find a way to address that issue. So we've been working through that really through the nonprofit agencies. As Sid said, it's not really a local government issue, because we just don't have the funding mechanism or the available funding to really provide a governmental solution. And I look at this as more of a societal issue that we need to deal with, kind of like through the churches, through the nonprofits, et cetera. So what I've been doing is working hard, trying to encourage those groups to work together, to come to the city to ask for the things that we can do, support in grant writing, support with legislation, those types of things. And then working with the health department, working through that health aspect. And one of the great examples of that was during COVID, was everything that was set up. Kyle Waterman did a great job helping coordinate those efforts to create a shelter at Samaritan House for the homeless where they could get treatment and hopefully avoid COVID while we were at it. So it's really a community effort. And that's the approach really that we have to focus on. But I think city government can take an active role in prodding and pushing that. And that's what I've been largely doing as mayor, trying to attend those meetings as much as I can between my work schedule and coordinating those efforts.
Thanks, Mark. Okay, you're going to have 2 minutes to answer this next question. It's another reader submitted question, and this one is regarding emergency services and the city budget. The city's 2021-22 fiscal year budget includes funding for 2 additional firefighters and 2 police officers. It's worth noting that there have been staffing challenges at some of our local fire stations. Christina Granrud wants to know if you would look to increase the number of police officers and firefighters serving the city. And as a follow-up, what are some of your other budget priorities? Mark, you're first on this one.
Okay. It was interesting when I first was elected mayor in 2014. We had an EMS levy where we specifically went out to the taxpayers and asked for a levy to help fund emergency medical services, the ambulance. At this point in time, we fund out of the general fund anywhere from $250,000 in years past. We've funded up to $500,000 of funding out of the general fund into the ambulance fund. So with that EMS levy, it failed. the voters told us essentially, we're not going to give you extra money. You have to operate within the parameters of the funds that you have available right now in the general fund. So we largely set about doing that. In 2018, we had a report drafted. We commissioned a report looking at staffing of the fire, basically fire and EMS. And that study came up with an optimal number. Granted, this is 2018. 2021, we've grown, we have more population. But at this point in time, we have the optimal number, according to the study, optimal number of firemen during the busiest peak time when we need fire and EMS services. We've added 2 this year as noted. And what I would like to see is, I'd like to see us get through the next fiscal year, bring back that group to do another study and an update given where we are with the population. And let's look at what do we need for staffing, because it always comes back to how do we fund it? And that's where we're going to have to really kind of tighten our belt if we need to add more firemen and EMS. So I think we're going to have to work on that through the study. We need to let numbers kind of dictate that. And I would encourage everybody to be a little patient. One of the other concerns that I have is as we've grown and we've spread out a little bit more, I want this group, when they come back to look, we need to see what the response times are going to be, because I think as we spread the 2 fire stations, I want to make sure that we have enough capacity to meet the required call times. So it's going to take a little more work, but we're going to continually add to do that.
Thanks, Mark.
2 minutes wasn't enough to get to anything else, so I'm sorry.
We'll follow up, but I'm going to give Sid a chance here. So go ahead, Sid.
Hey, like the mayor mentioned, if you look at our total responses, by far the thing that's stressing our firemen out the most is the ambulance service. So the emergency calls that are not fires. And, you know, we've looked at some different methods to add to that through maybe like a private company or other ways to supplement that. The mayor's correct. If you look at the studies and if you take into account how each of our separate areas here in the valley support each other, we are at a good staffing level as far as the consultants tell us, right? And they'll probably raise that with our population being raised. But the reality is that, you know, people come to Kalispell to recreate, they come to Kalispell to shop, they come to Kalispell to do a multitude of things, to go out to the bars on Friday night or whatever. We have a little bit higher of a load just due to our role as a destination than some of these other places such as the county. So, you know, we have a little bit more stress put on us here, especially in those emergency call situations. And, you know, I want to continue to look at that. There's got to be some way that we can, you know, add to the services that we have available here. We need to take a really close look at response times. Response times is the biggest factor that drives whether we need more personnel or not. And we have to be a lot better at scheduling both the training we have for our firemen, and we have to be realistic about the sickness. So sickness and training were a big factor in why we had to close that North Station down so many times. You know, hopefully we'll get past this COVID thing and that won't be as big of a problem. But I just want people to realize that we are looking at this consistently. Thanks.
I do want to get to the other part of that question. So I'll give you guys each 90 seconds to follow up on what are your other budget priorities. So Mark, why don't you go ahead and answer first?
Now, the other budget priorities that we have, for me, one of the biggest things that I look at is fire, ambulance, and then police. You know, we are a growing community. So what I look at are the priorities. We need to be able to deliver those basic services of life safety. And that is one of the key priorities that we have. If we look deeper into the budget, some of the other things that we have that we need to make sure that we're prepared for and have the funding for, it's water and sewer. I need to make sure when you turn on your tap, you've got water. And when you flush your toilet, it has somewhere to go and it's treated. So the budget priorities we look at is really focused on delivering those primary things that local government provides. Fire, police, and water and sewer. Those are the key priorities that I look at. The next, kind of down the list a little further, is really we look at the development and planning section of the budget. It's important to me. It's not a big part of our budget, but it's really where we look at bringing business into Kalispell, adding better paying jobs to Kalispell, recruiting business, and creating the, shall I say, the palette where business owners can come in and create their own art with their business.
Thanks. Sid?
Yeah, so Mayor addressed a lot of this, but I can just stress a few things. Sewer is a biggie. We get hit with unfunded mandates on our sewer process consistently. So we have to be prepared for that. I think we're in a good place. We have capital projects on the books to expand and to replace the things that need to be replaced in our sewage system. We've done a great job looking at those and preparing for the future. As the mayor also said earlier, when we infill, especially downtown, those services become cheaper. So if we can cut costs in that type of situation where we're not spreading out so far, then we can do more with what we have. And so that's something I would look at. Budget concerns for me. I am adamant about having a balanced budget. We have had balanced budgets here in Kalispell for quite some time. We're really good with the budget. We have a great staff that helps in that regard. I will continue that for sure. And my goal is to make sure that we don't dig into your pocketbook more than we're digging now.
Thanks. I appreciate you guys getting back to that second part of the question. All right, we're going to move on to a new one. You're going to have 2 minutes to answer this question. Construction of the Kalispell Parkline Trail is progressing quickly, but there are still many decisions left to be made about the future development along that new trail corridor and the core area in general. How would you steer commercial and residential projects for the city's downtown core area? And Sid, you're going to start.
Sure. A lot of that's already been done. We're already seeing the fruits of the Parkline Trail and our downtown plan. Businesses are interested in moving into those areas. Developers are interested in building units along the Parkline Trail. And I think that's going to be one of the best places to live here in Kalispell not too long from now. If you've seen some of the developments that have been put in, they're amazing. And they're architecturally amazing. And we didn't have architectural standards that raised it that high. These are just innovative developers that are making our downtown a cool place to hang out. So, that's already starting. And like I said, making it as reasonable as possible for businesses to be downtown is one of my goals. I know that we need standards down there, but I want to make sure that we can support local businesses and not just these expensive boutiques that come in. I don't think that we have to stress that too much more. We're seeing a good demand for those spaces. We have to make sure that our commercial areas downtown grow along with our housing, but that seems to be the case.
Thanks. Mark.
Yeah, we look at the rail line and we look at all of the work that we've put into that. And, I got onto council. It was one of those things where, wow, my development background, I cannot wait to work on this. And the biggest key is this is that placemaking thing I was talking about. So as a city, what we looked at is how do we encourage development into this area? And one of the things that we did is we created a new zone for the area on the rail. And so this B4 zoning eliminates some of the requirements for height. It eliminates some of the parking requirements because we realize that more people will be coming into this area. It won't necessarily have to drive a car every day. This will be a walkable community. So what we're looking at through the development of this is let's set the palette. Let's let the developers come in, work with the architecture review committee, and let them bring their creativity to it. If we try to do the creativity at the city council level, you end up with something that looks like the Soviet era Politburo buildings in Moscow, and we won't like it. So this is where I encourage the developers to bring their talents. And that's what we've done. We've created the palette. When Tom Jentz was the planning director, he and I talked several times about how do we unleash the creativity of the developer? And that's what we did with the creation of the zoning that we did downtown. And I think with the importance of the zoning that we put into place downtown.
Thanks. Let's stick with some questions about downtown parking and transportation. You have 2 minutes to answer this one. City Council recently approved its Move 2040 plan that lays out a vision for future transportation needs, including proposed lane expansions on busy corridors and additional roundabouts as traffic calming devices. Do you agree with that Move 2040 recommendations? And what are some of your ideas to improve traffic and parking in the city? Mark, you're first.
You know, I do agree with the work that we did in the 24 Move It plan. When we worked on this plan, one of the key components that we looked at was how do we work towards having 3 lanes of traffic on Main Street? Because everything we kept hearing from the downtown business owners in the community is we want downtown to be walkable. We want a lane on each way and a turn lane in the middle so we can have less of a highway feel downtown. Once again, this goes to we want placemaking. So the 2040 plan was really geared around how do we do that? And it had to look at some of the other areas that we would need to improve traffic to make that reduction in traffic downtown possible. The biggest thing that we did was complete the West Side bypass. And when we completed the upgrade now at the Foys Lake interchange through the grant that we received from Tiger, that is going to take a lot of the through traffic away from downtown, which will hopefully help with the current situation downtown. As we continue to grow, we're going to have to look at some of those other things. I've been a proponent ever since I became mayor for an East Side bypass. Unfortunately, I think that horse may have already left the barn because some of the properties that we would have needed to acquire or MDT would have needed to acquire have been turned over, and we've seen some houses built there. So we're looking at other alternatives there. I've met a couple different times with MDT to look at some of those alternatives. The other thing we need to do is improve the east-west traffic flow through Kalispell. And we've looked at some of the options up by FECC, extending 4 Mile all the way across to White for Stage. And then some of the other routes would be Rose Crossing. How do we improve that with lights? And then the improvements that are going to be happening soon through MDT on Reserve. So the biggest things with traffic that we can do is work with Montana Department of Transportation. We do have some options that were in the plan that would change some things in some existing neighborhoods. I won't name them, but I know that they wouldn't be very popular amongst those neighborhoods. And we also want to retain the character of those neighborhoods. So it's a balancing act, but MDT is really our best partner in this.
Thank you. Sid.
The mayor's totally right. We're the crossroads of 2 highways right here in the center of Kalispell. So we have some innate traffic issues just because of that. People are trying to get past and through Kalispell in some cases. In some cases, it's the destination. But in both cases, that traffic is mixed. We do have to work with the Department of Transportation on a lot of these projects because they actually own the road in some cases. So the downtown is a touchy subject, as the Department of Transportation is trying to improve throughput, and we're trying to relax throughput and make sure we have more walking and biking available. So it's important to note that the Move 2040 plan was developed by a traffic engineer. Traffic engineers are concerned with throughput and efficiency. And it has some good planning in it and some good alternatives, but none of that is a project. None of that is on the books as a project today. In order to become a project, we have to then work with the community, and we have to get input from the public. And there's going to be a compromise on a lot of this stuff. So I encourage people that do not get involved with city council and do not get involved with city issues when we have these meetings and these public meetings for input. It's very important that you come down and give us your input at that time, because after the project is approved and underway, it's too late. So get involved early. Please partner with us as a community so that we can provide the solutions that you want.
Thanks. All right, next question. You're gonna have 2 minutes on this one as well. We're gonna talk about recreational marijuana sales. Cities are required by the state to set regulations for recreational marijuana before January 1st, 2022. Recently, the council decided to limit sales to industrial zones. What is your vision for recreational marijuana sales and taxation in the city? And Sid, we're going to start with you.
Thanks. This is a pretty big differentiator between myself and the mayor. If you're having trouble finding an issue, this would be one of them. I was one of 3 council members that wanted to diversify our economy by including new cannabis industry into our city in accordance with the will of the voters. A lot of people don't take that into account. This initiative, which then was modified by a House bill at the state level, was something that the voters voted on themselves. And part of this was the inclusion of the cannabis industry into zoning and into our current cities and counties. I am in favor of that, opening up a little bit more than it is. Obviously, I don't want a dispensary on the corner of every street. Dispensaries are allowed to sell. You are not allowed to use there. So it's not like a bar. It's more like a liquor store where you just go buy cannabis, then you go home and consume it. So, this was an exciting time for me. I wanted to use that to grow our economy. And I was in the clear minority on the council. And you mentioned that it's zoned into industrial zones right now. That is the case, but there's also a lot of things that have buffers around them that they cannot go into. So if it's within 300 feet of a school, of a church, of a residential area, or from a park, it can't be there either. So when you overlay that on the map of our industrial zones, the only real viable place that they could move into with the restrictive zoning that we have for industrial zones only is Old School Station. And that's pretty much a little bit of an area that's cut off from Kalispell. It's not on a road that people can see, and nobody's going to want to move there. So in effect, what we've done is we've banned this new cannabis industry from Kalispell. So it's going to be on our edges, just like it is now.
Thank you. Mark.
Yeah, this, as Sid mentioned, this is one of those items that differentiates him and I substantially. And when we looked at this at the council level, we had multiple work sessions and multiple conversations. And this is one of those issues where, there's 9 people on the council, and I think I heard like 9 different opinions on this. But as Sid mentioned, I think the majority of the opinions was basically, we want to restrict it at this point in time. I'm looking at an issue where I need to authorize zoning within the city of Kalispell, and I had to vote on an issue, and that's what I did, that allows the sale of recreational cannabis in town. I'm also waiting on what are the final rules going to be from the Montana Department of Revenue, because I want to see what those state rules are. So when we looked at this, we had a lot of conversation about buffer areas, et cetera. So as we went through this whole process, we talked about those buffer areas, and we talked about some of the other costs. And as I mentioned to the council, one of my big issues with the sale of medical marijuana, the sale of recreational marijuana, is everybody has said, well, there's tax revenues from it. Well, right now, the tax revenues, we can get some from the state. We could also get some from the county commissioners if they would vote to add a 3% tax, which they're not. They've told me they're not going to add that. So I'm looking at these tax issues. I'm also looking at some of the other things that we found through studies and in my business and in the finance world. When we review municipal bonds from municipalities that have the sale of medical marijuana and recreational marijuana, the borrowing costs on those municipal bonds from those cities that allow it are higher than the comparable cities that don't allow it. So what I want to do is take a slow approach to this. We did take a very slow approach by limiting to the industrial zones, but I think what I want to do is see what do the regulations look like, and let's go slow. We don't, as Sid mentioned, we don't want this in every street corner. And I think it's due for more of a community conversation with more limitations versus just wide open, which is what we were going to see if everything was approved according to the planning board recommendation there.
Thanks, Mark. Right, we're right on schedule. So we're going to go to a few quick reader questions. And for these, you're going to have 90 seconds to answer. This reader submitted question comes from Nathaniel Prince, and he wants to know your position on masks, vaccine mandates, and other COVID regulations regarding public spaces and businesses. Mark, you're first.
So this is one of those interesting things. I look at your own personal health as your issue. This is one of those where I'm not a big fan of mandates. I don't like government telling me I have to do something. At the same token, I don't like government telling a business that they can't ask somebody to wear a mask. So I differ a little bit from my Republican governor on this and my Republican legislature, because I think as a business owner, if you want to require your customers to wear a mask, that's your right as that business owner and that property owner. But for government to come down and say, you have to wear a mask, I disagree. When we look at vaccine mandates, once again, I disagree with vaccine mandates. Your own personal health should come first. And when I look at that, I look at the vaccines, I know there are a number of health issues that individuals have, and they're afraid to take the vaccine, justifiably so. And it is their right to dictate what they put into their body. We have basically brand new vaccines. They seem to be working. We don't know what the long-term effects are. And I would much rather see people make their own individual choice. I don't think it's the place of the government to come down and tell everybody what they should do.
Thanks. Sid.
Thanks. So I was the only council member who voted against the governor's emergency order as applied to Kalispell. This included the lockdowns and mandates and put our businesses at risk. I strive for a voluntary society and community, and for government to keep its hands off business. So in my opinion, and as a voluntary type of person, I want our businesses to be able to make the determination themselves whether they're going to require masks. I don't think that anybody should be required to have the vaccination. I think there's some interesting things that go around that. I myself am vaccinated, but it was this choice should be left to your family and your community. It's not a government mandate. I'm vaccinated because my wife is a surgery tech and my daughter at the time worked at a retirement community. It was very important to them that I was vaccinated. So I looked at all the information that I had available to me and I decided to be vaccinated. But if somebody makes that same choice and is not vaccinated, I won't hold it against them. You know, I was part of deployment to Desert Storm where we got that anthrax vaccination that was pushed through incredibly fast and ended up hurting a lot of soldiers. So I'm a little bit wary of fast vaccinations that don't have a lot of testing.
Thanks, Sid. All right, again, 90 seconds on this next question. This reader submitted question asks about the city's relationship with the county and other cities. And do you have any thoughts on working with the county and other cities in the valley on common challenges like housing and transportation? Sid, you're first.
That's a great question. I don't get a real good sense after my time on the council that we have a very tight relationship with either the county or the other cities. I think we're about to see a little bit more of that come to fruition with our expansion of having Whitefish and Columbia Falls incorporated onto the health board. I think that's going to help us with some issues as far as working with the county and the other cities. I would like to see more cooperation with both the county and the other cities. And, you know, I'm willing to open that dialogue at any time. If we're not all working together, then we're kind of working against each other. So I don't see that today. I don't get the feeling that we're doing much cooperation with either the other cities or the county. And I'd like to increase that.
Thank you.
Okay, it's interesting. This is one of those deals is that you don't typically see at the council level or at various meetings. We have in the past had joint meetings with county commissioners and with the other two cities on the fifth Mondays. I think since I've been mayor, I think we've had two of those where we typically deal on common issues, like when we dealt with the 911 center. But as the mayor, one of the things that I do is I do meet regularly with my county commissioners, and I do have a good relationship with them. I do talk with my city manager about issues that come up through that and ask that he meet with the county administrator and discuss issues. So I know there's actually a lot of cooperation between the administration through the city manager to the county administrator. Additionally, I do talk with Mayor Malfeld and Whitefish about once a quarter. And I don't talk with the mayor in Columbia Falls. Don works long hours every day in his excavation business, but I talk to the city manager at every landfill board meeting, which is every month, about different issues that we have between the cities and county-wide. It was through those conversations that we looked at how do we take some of the federal funding to use the federal funding for septic treatment and treatment for our sewer system effluent and solids that would also benefit the other communities. So there is cooperation, but it's more behind the scenes conversation and relationship building that happens, really as the mayor and as the commissioners and working with those other cities.
Thank you. All right, last question, again, 90 seconds before we'll do closing remarks after this question. So this question comes from Elma Giovasis, and she says that one of the reasons we see local small governments working is because we're not dealing with divisive politics on the national stage. She likes seeing city council members coming together from all spectrums to do what's best for Kalispell. Would you agree that keeping the city council and mayoral races nonpartisan is best? Mark, you're first.
This is one of those issues. We look at national politics and we look at the partisanship that comes up. And in my time in DC, there's times you could actually see some great partisanship between Republicans and Democrats at the Senate and House level. I know that surprises people given the current climate. But as we look at the current races, I don't know that necessarily adding a Republican tag behind my name and a Libertarian tag behind Sid's name and a Democratic name, if we had a third, would really add more rancor to the race because I look at it, Sid and I have our own differences. There's a lot of areas where we do agree, but there's some key areas where we disagree, but we're able to disagree in a respectful manner. And I think that is the key. One of the things that we lose when we see the divisiveness and the partisanship is we lose that ability to have a conversation and learn from the other side. And I don't want to lose that at the council side. And I know there's times at the council level where it comes out in meetings, and we've worked hard trying to work our way through that. And we'll continue to work hard through that. But what I'd like to see is good, honest, hard conversations at the council level, because we do need 9 different viewpoints. It can't just be my viewpoint for how the city works. It is a conglomeration of the 9 council members and the representation, what we learn from our community members.
Thank you. Sid.
This is a great question, and it actually almost seems like a plant question for me. I know the mayor just got a few extra points because he's got a cute kitty cat in the background there. But this question is amazing. Thank you so much, whoever submitted this. In my mind, I would love to see nonpartisan races extend all the way up through president. It makes you look at the person and what they stand for. You can be misled by the letter in front of their name. And, I encourage people to research their candidates. Everybody should be researching who they're voting for and not voting for them because of a letter next to your name. That's how you get candidates in place that don't actually have your same ideals. So, I'm a big fan of nonpartisanship at the city council level. I think we do a great job, and we will continue to do a great job at compromising between all our different ideological views on council. And part of that is because we don't have to muster up behind a party. And So I take that very seriously. The Secretary of State does not allow us to represent a party in a nonpartisan position. So we have to keep that separate. You have to put on a different hat when you get to city council, and you have to represent just the people that you represent. So in my case, all of Kalispell, and especially looking at my people in Ward 4. So thanks for that question.
Thanks, Sid. All right, so we're going to go to final candidate closing remarks. I do appreciate you guys being here with us this evening. You're each going to have 2 minutes to conclude your thoughts and share your own vision for the future of Kalispell. Mark, go first.
Okay. It's been an honor for me to serve as mayor for the community for the past 8 years. It has not been easy at times, and we've had our challenges over the years, but we have persevered and prospered. There are risks in front of us as we manage the rapid growth and we continue our path forward. I commit to the citizens that I will not waver from my commitment to you. I will work hard to protect and improve local control. I will work to protect us all by supporting our police and fire, and I will work to ensure our services are delivered. The challenges in front of us and the complexity of running a city are daunting. As mayor, I'm like the chairman of the board of directors of a big company. I ask, do you want someone with the knowledge and experience like mine to be at the helm? If you do, and you believe your best interest is at the core of my decision-making, I ask that you cast your vote for me, Mark Johnson, on November 2nd. Thank you.
Thanks, Mark. Sid.
Thanks. I'd briefly like to go back to that mandate issue and just expand a little bit. I have a picture that I printed off and saved of a young protester in Denver on his knees in front of 2 militarized policemen with ARs pointed at him. And when I think of mandates or passports or the government making you do something, that's the picture that comes into my mind. This race is not about my opponent or myself. It's about our community. I wanted to run for mayor to have a little more impact on city government. This allows me to promote community over government as much as possible. The larger government grows, the smaller community is. The inverse is also true. The emergency orders, lockdowns, and mandates, along with the other craziness of 2020, solidified my desire to run. I had to evaluate if I wanted to wait another 4 years. And after consulting with my wife, my children, and my God, the answer was run now. If an unobstructed free market, your property rights, and your individual rights are priorities to you, then I'm your vote. Thanks.
Thanks, Sid. And thank you again to our candidates and everyone watching online. Providing the electorate with the most relevant information possible is a job that we here at the Daily Interlake take very seriously. And please make sure you vote. If you missed any of tonight's event, it's going to be available later at dailyinterlake.com. Thank you both again. I really appreciate your time, and good night.